All right, first on the block would be the Chris Jones signing. He signed for approximately $160 million over 5 years, $95 million guaranteed, making it the largest contract any team has ever offered a defensive tackle in the history of the NFL. This comes as a surprise to many people. It was expected for the Chiefs to tag Jones and sign Ladarius Sneed, but in the surprise move, they signed Chris Jones to that historic contract. What do you think about this?
I think they overpaid. I think the Chiefs were in a good spot in their defense. This goes counter to everything that I'm hearing on the news, but I think the Chiefs would have been much better off keeping about 5 or 6 of their core people together than keeping Chris Jones. I think they're going to go the way of the Rams when they signed Aaron Donald to the big contract. They've been pretty mediocre plus ever since, and I don't know how you keep that defense together, paying him all that money. They've already lost Willie Gay, who was very, very good, and they're probably going to lose Snead. That's 2 big pieces to that defense already. They've got a lot of offensive linemen that are going to be coming up for big contracts and next year and the year after. So I don't know how they keep it all together and pay Chris Jones. If guys want to be there in Kansas City and play for a winner, they should be willing to take a little bit of a discount. And if they don't, let them tag them, get 2 first-round picks for them, and move on.
No, exactly. Especially when you talk about losing a lot of the offensive line. Nick Allegretti, we've already lost to Washington. He signed 3 years, $16 million. Willie Gay, 1 year, $5 million on the Saints. That's kind of surprising. You would think if we could take him for 1 year, $5 million, why not? Yeah. And as far as picking between tagging Chris Jones and Snead, you would think tagging Jones and trading him for first-round picks is kind of like the more appropriate pivot. So our defensive line is already pretty good, and you look at this year's NFL Combine, it's defensive tackle after defensive tackle running like 4.7, 4.6s. I'm not saying it's Chris Jones is directly replaceable, but I think our defensive line has the ability to still be incredibly good without him. It's kind of like pivoting off Tyreek Hill, crazy in the moment, but at the end of the day, we converted Tyreek Hill into Karlaftis and Trent McDuffie. Kind of becoming like a top 5 2-man game in the NFL as far as cornerbacks go. And if you want to talk about, not spending too much money, if we did overpay Ladarius Sneed, the highest paid position in the NFL is a QB. The furthest position from the quarterback is probably a cornerback. There's a direct relation as far as how much you pay the further you get away from a quarterback.
I think they probably could have locked them up. I think he wanted to stay in Kansas City. I think they probably could have locked them up, giving him like a 5-year, $75 million.
The amount you're going to pay him per year is a lot lower than Chris Jones. Yeah, is what I'm trying to say. And all I'm trying to get across is you're paying him about $12 million a year. You're probably paying him like $15 million a year, however long it's going to be. And it's a lot harder in today's NFL to pivot off a cornerback. Like as everyone says, it's a very top-heavy position all across the league. There's maybe 4 or 5 guys that are actually elite, and everyone else is just, pretty average, and there's not any help coming in the Combine for years to come. If you pivot off Chris Jones, like I said, the Combine is filled with promising defensive tackles, and tag him non-exclusively, you get rid of him and bring in 2 first-round picks on top of saving all of that money, on top of keeping together that core of the defense that everyone talks about. Because the defense is not only Chris Jones. A lot of, if you casually watch the Chiefs, all you think about is Chris Jones being the heart of the defense. But you look at Spags and the way he speaks about it, it's all about guys like Nick Bolton. Nick Bolton goes down, Tranquil comes in, high IQ players that can all replace each other and that all have the same values and the same core to continue getting the defense going. So losing one guy, Chris Jones, who's clearly a leader, there's other leaders that are there to step up. It's all a salary cap move.
Yeah, they've got a lot of leaders. I think Allegretti, or whatever his name is, Allegretti, the guy that went to Washington, $7 million a year. He's a backup, but he stepped in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. He started the Super Bowl, and they did pretty well in the Super Bowl. So that is going to hurt. Snead, that's going to really hurt. And they're talking about getting like a second and a third round, or a second or third round pick for him, or 2 or 3 mid-late round picks for him. whereas Jones would have brought in 2 first-round picks. And I don't think you can replace Snead with. I mean, you get real lucky if you found somebody in the second or third round to replace him. And I didn't think they did that bad in the first game against Detroit. I mean, what they lose to them, 21-20, and they pretty much should have won the game. It wasn't the defense. You know what I mean? They were able to handle Detroit's vaunted offense without them. So I think they should have kept the. I think it's important for them to keep it all together. If you want to know what they are without. With Chris Jones and with below average defense, look at the last 3 or 4 years. Their defense has been average to below average, and I think they're going to go back to that next year, paying him $30 million.
The Chiefs fans, remember, it's not too long ago we had to rely on Mahomes putting up 40 in order to win games. That's what it was. We've had Chris Jones since 2016. While he's been on that defense, we've had to rely on Mahomes to put up double-digit numbers and guide the offense to win every game. And it's only been this year that we've had a top defense in the league that has been able to save Mahomes when the offense has totally struggled.
Willie Gay is an absolute freak on defense too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he gets injured a lot, but I mean, he's done some things as a linebacker. He number one, he can cover wide receivers. He can blitz. He can take on. He's an absolute freak. That's going to hurt, and they could have kept him for $5 million. Football, it's not a get the best player and pay him whatever he asks for type of thing. There's got to be strategy involved, and I get the feeling that 90% of sports teams don't understand what a puzzle it is to piece together a team and keep it all together. If
you got a guy like T.J. Watt, give him that type of money. If you got a guy like Hutchinson, give him that type of money. If you look at his stats over the course of the past 5 years, he's probably like 9th in sacks.
Yeah.
And the credit everyone's giving Chris Jones is when the moments are totally big. If there's 2 minutes left in the game, 2 minutes left in half. If the game's on the line, you can always rely on him to make the big plays. We're not saying this in any type of disrespectful way. We're talking about strategy and pivoting off your best players to save money. If you get rid of Chris Jones, you can still pivot off and have a great defensive line without him. When you get rid of Snead, there are no cornerbacks in the league that are not of his caliber, but there's maybe like 4 or 5. So he would have been the smart one to tag. He would have been the smart one, or he would have been the smart one to pay, and Chris Jones would have been the smart one to kind of pivot off of, because you could still kind of build that defensive line to consider it very good. Maybe not necessarily what it was, but that's a good pivot.
Yeah, we've had 5 years of the defensive backs. The Chiefs have had 5 years of the defensive backs just getting torched, and we finally have a couple of quarterbacks that are arguably, top 3 in the league. And don't get me wrong about Chris Jones. He's my absolute favorite player on the Chiefs. I mean, and he's an absolute stud. He puts up the stats. He comes up big. I mean, he's my absolute favorite player on the defense on the Chiefs and has been for the last 5 years. But you can't pay him.
Historic player.
Yeah.
He's made that everyone points to most recently. He's the one that forced the field goal in the Super Bowl, that forced it to overtime. It resulted in the chip. We get all that. But if you start paying guys like him historic money, you develop the same type of culture as the Pittsburgh Steelers. But if you start paying your defense a ton of money, you're not going to be able to afford those offensive weapons. And with a quarterback like Mahomes, with the way the NFL has gone, where it's just totally aired out and every single quarterback gets however many throws a game, you can't get stuck paying your defense out. You can't totally focus all of your money on defense, in my opinion.
That's true. Steelers, same thing. The Aaron Donald thing. They paid him, and they haven't been able to get out of the first round of the playoffs ever since.
Oh, it's an
and by the way,
league.
Snead had an even bigger player. They keep talking about Jones with the big play. The absolute biggest play was Snead poking the ball out of the guy on the
what was he, 2 inches away from a touchdown. That's what I'm saying.
Any bigger than that.
He's the discount, in my opinion. Paying him historic money would be a discount, but we wouldn't be having the same discussion where it's like, if you pay a cornerback historic money, you can still afford offensive players because they really don't get paid that much. Chris Jones is And that eats, everyone always likes to say, good for him, man. He got paid, but you're taking away a lot of money from a lot
what about
of players.
other guys that are making $1 million a year?
No, exactly.
To give them too. But Willie Gay is an absolute stud at $5 million a year.
That's what I'm saying. But you got to make decisions.
1 year, $5 million.
And I get it. If we're sitting here saying, $5 million, but that's what we're trying to say. When you pay someone like Jones that much money, you start letting guys like that go for $5 million a year.
You can't.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens. They got rid of Tyreek Hill, and I remember saying what a few draft picks, and not really that. Didn't really make a whole lot of sense. But we converted them into Karlaftis and Trent McDuffie and survived. Yeah. I think this would have been the same situation where it's, if you looked at maybe even like the Patriots for the past 15 years, including the Tom Brady era more so, where they would pivot off these guys like Wes Welker, and you would sit there and question it, and you would go, well, where do they go from here? Why are they getting rid of all these players? They kept Tom Brady and Gronk and maybe a few other players, and the dynasty kept going. They were able to pivot off these great players. 2 Super Bowls after we got rid of Tyreek Hill. Not expected, but it happened. I think this situation should have been the same thing, where it's like everyone loves Chris Jones. Every Chiefs fan loves Chris Jones. We all would have thought it was crazy to get rid of him, but I think that's the decision to make, to pivot off him, not get rid of someone like Snead, who, like we already just said, there's a cornerback shortage in the NFL. We can't rely on the guys we already have when we already have someone like him.
So we got to talk about other people besides the Chiefs, I guess. Huh?
Yeah, we do.